The Daewoo Espero heralded Daewoo's arrival on the UK market in 1995, but this design harks back to 1990 when the model was launched in Korea, and actually it's a rework of a Citroen design by Bertone. And from the rear, perhaps that becomes clear. This section especially is so very Citroen Xantia with the way the glass areas work. So Bertone was working on styling proposals for Citroen. The XM and the Xantia were both Bertone projects, but the way it worked is that Citroen's designers would design some cars, Bertone would design some cars, and then Citroen would choose which ones to proceed with. In both the Xantia and the XM, Bertone designs were chosen, even though they were getting quite close to what Citroen's own designers were doing. This design was cast off, and Daewoo approached Bertone, and somehow a deal was done, and Citroen actually agreed, yes, you can use this design. But under the skin, this car is a Mk2 Cavalier, albeit tweaked slightly by Daewoo's own engineers. They were very cheap when they first hit the market in the UK. They had outstanding warranties. You bought them in branches of Halfords or special Daewoo dealers that had commission-free dealers selling the cars. So all very different, but what's it actually like? So Daewoo actually has a long history represented by this badge here, established as early as the 1930s. By the 1970s, the motor division was building Opels under license, so European designs built in South Korea but under license, in much the same way that Hyundai existed then but was building Fords under license. So this was General Motors' attempt to get in on the South Korean market. After building various cast-offs of the Mk2 Astra, even some sold as the Pontiac Le Mans in some countries, they started developing their own bodywork. And like I say, this is a Citroen design but was cast off. But they rebodied a Mk2 Cavalier to very good effect to create a much more modern looking design. This is like an alternative to the Mark III Cavalier, in the same way that a Hyundai Stella, also from South Korea, was seen as an alternative to a Ford Sierra, because that was developed on the Cortina platform. So similar in its own way. So the styling of this car is quite radical. There is no grille here at all. All the cooling is done in vents underneath the bumper, and then you've got these big wraparound headlamps looking very Citroen-esque, separate main beam filament going on. But yeah, a very striking design, and I think sadly subsequent Daewoo's didn't quite match this. The Nubira and Leganza, also with Italian-esque styling, didn't quite hit the mark. The Matiz did, and I own one of those and it's lovely, and a beautiful piece of Italian design again. But there's a sharpness to this styling that I really like. I absolutely adore the rear styling as well, with this full width panel going on, and we've got indicator bulbs, we'll show those later on, in both these sectors as well. Fairly low lip to get into a truly massive boot. But let's start by having a peek at the other end. Let's have a look at the engine. Oh wow, look at this, super clean. It's worth pointing out, this car has covered 21,000 miles, but a very familiar sight under here, the ribbed cam cover. It is the old Family 2 engine from Vauxhall, 8 valves, single overhead cam with a rubber drive belt, and about 115 brake horsepower. And so exactly the same as you get in a Mk2 Cavalier in the CDI. I think the SRIs had a little more. So very familiar to any mechanics in Europe, and I think that probably helped these cars score some early success. Oddly, you could get a 1.5 which had a twin cam engine, another development of that Family 2 series, but built by Holden, I believe, in Australia. Climbing into the Espero is a bit of a strange one, because some aspects feel very Vauxhall indeed. That ignition barrel is pure Vauxhall, the steering wheel is not, and the dash layout also is very different. The gear lever is very Mark II. You've even got the lift collar to put it into reverse gear. But otherwise, it feels fairly contemporary and modern. You've got vents in the doors here, which are quite unusual, but a really good idea. So you've got ventilation to the window and also to the face. So here are those wonderful vents. Obviously the vent comes through here. Lovely bit of design. We've got electric windows, we've got electric mirrors, and you'll see that straight out of a Vauxhall. and that's the lever to get the door open again. There's also an electronic button for the boot release. We'll have a play with that in a minute. This example feels so fresh and so new. It's in absolutely lovely, absolutely untouched condition. Even the seats though look very Vauxhall. That's a lovely soft velour, really comfortable seats. I've even got the original cassette player. This is slightly unusual because it should have a CD auto changer, but this car apparently doesn't have one, but it does have air conditioning. So that's quite novel. Some lovely details here. So if you want to adjust the brightness of the dashboard, you press that and then you can adjust the rheostat like so. And there's a similar one over here to do the windscreen wiper delay. You've got heated windows and mirrors, and it's making the point very clearly. And then look at that, just 21,000 miles on the clock. Just superb. But yeah, the driving position, it feels like a Vauxhall, but then you look at the dashboard and clearly that's much more modern than a Mk2 Cavalier. Although that glove box lock is exactly the same. Oh, we've got the original books in here. Oh yes, so we've got the original Espero owner's manual from Daewoo. How to rock the car. I should have used that on the beach recently when I got my car stuck. How to use the ventilation, snow chains, all sorts of information contained within. That's lovely to have. And this car has a very interesting history. It was owned by an old chap who bought it as a retirement gift to himself. He used it very sparingly, only on occasions, but then had to give up driving and would regularly get the car out just to clean it and to warm the engine through. The sort of thing I'd do if I was old and not able to drive. I'd just have a car just to drive back and forth and enjoy that way. He eventually passed away and his family were going to scrap the car. The scrap man was called, the scrap man turned up, and thankfully some neighbours saved the car and they bought it. They said, no, don't let this car go for scrap. We know what this car meant to the owner. We will buy it, we will take it on. And they did, and they've kept it in splendid condition. They've had to replace the exhaust in places. It's hardly surprising. If it was just starting the engine and letting it warm through, it wouldn't dry the exhaust out. It's actually really bad for it. But other than that, everything is pretty much as it would have been way back in 1995. For this is one of the first cars in that first batch of Daewoo's that came to the UK market. And they were awesome value. If you wanted air conditioning and electric windows and central locking and all those sorts of toys, you had to pay a lot of money for that on what is an ordinary car. You're talking Cavalier CD, Sierra gear, top of the range, and yet these cars were coming in. I think these were about £12,000 brand new, and I think you'd be paying more like 15 or 16 for an equivalent Sierra. So really good value. There's an electric sunroof as well, which I forgot to mention. And a digital clock here. We've got a push button light, sun visors as you'd expect. But yeah, it's just a splendid car in great condition. This sunroof is really clever. I need to find the key. So if I pop the ignition on, which always accompanied by 4 beeps apparently, we don't know why that is, but it does do that. Yeah, it's a tilt sunroof, but then it's also a slide sunroof. So it's a Webasto unit, and it's a shame it's raining today really. I'm pleased to say it works beautifully, and there's the digital clock, which looks very retro in itself. I don't know what the D and S buttons do. Jumping into the rear, which not many people will have done over the years, look at that, there's loads of legroom with a seat set for me. So it's really very spacious. Headroom's a little tight, but not actually too bad. Helped by the fact the sunroof is an external unit, so it's not rubbing headroom here. And yeah, it's light, it's airy, it's quite a nice place to be. I've got grab handles up here, little courtesy lights which I can press. I've got electric windows in the back, which certainly would have been a novelty in the day. But yeah, it's all very pleasant. I have to show you this as well, because we've got the center armrest, all very comfy, lovely bit of velour to rest your arm on, and we've got what looks to be a ski hatch. You pull this flap down, and then there's this, which actually rolls out, so you can use it as a ski hatch. You can't get into the boot, but this will stop your skis getting all over the interior of your car. I've never seen the likes of anything like that. It's like having a parachute in here. They've got to fold it up again so we can stash it away. But yeah, a remarkable bit of design there. I wonder how many people actually transported skis in their Daewoo Espero. If you did, leave a note in the comments. Incidentally, this car is called Rogue, and you can find it on Instagram. Apparently it's more famous than I am on Instagram, because I'm not on Instagram. But there's another delicious detail here. If we lift this, you then can't push it down again unless you open the boot with the key, at which point it sort of swings down back into place. So that's a really nice detail, I think. Just a bit peculiar. But the boot is enormous. When they sold the Espero in Australia, they said it had more boot space than a Ford Falcon or a Holden Commodore. Now, it came onto the market before my AU Fairmont, which is like a posh Falcon, so I can't do a direct comparison, but it must be said this boot is a plentiful size. Look at this, look at the depth of it. And we've still got a tool tray in here. Look, it's got spanners, it's got grips, and it's had some locking wheel nuts fitted by the look of it. We've even got some Daewoo original fuses. I don't know where the spare wheel is though. Is the spare wheel under the floor? Mysterious. Where does the spare wheel live? Or is that it there? No, there it is. It's further along. Aha! And it is a full-size one too. That's mightily impressive. So yeah, a huge boot, and you can just see the back end of the ski hatch there for inserting your skis. Right, here we go then. I've never driven a Daewoo Espero before, so this is going to be interesting. And you fire it up, it sounds very much like a Vauxhall Cavalier, really. It even makes a very familiar Cavalier noise. That Family 2 engine, great engine. We'll do a wiper test. They're slightly out of sync with each other, so that's fun. See, there we go. I wonder if the linkage is shared with the Mk2 Astra, but that did a different thing where they came down together, so maybe I'm talking utter rubbish. I will shut up now before I upset the people who aren't as interested in wipers as me. But yeah, I mean, you start pulling away, it just feels like you're driving a Cavalier. But it must be said, the ride is mostly very good. It isn't always good. It crashes a bit sometimes, which might just be that classic McPherson strut front end for you. But it's almost got a bit of float to it, which I don't remember from Mk2 Cavaliers. Check all is clear, and away we go. But I mean, it feels brand new, this car, so I won't be giving it too much hammer. It's probably never been hammered in its life. And yeah, it feels very Cavalier-esque. I'm going to put the aircon on because it is a little sweaty in here. So it's a 2-litre engine, 115 brake horse, 8 valve, and loads of mid-range punch. So it's a nice muscular feeling engine for getting up these hills. You know, it will go quite quickly if you ask it to, but the target market of these cars wasn't the boy racers and enthusiasts, and this was very much the top of the range model, and still very unusual for its time, having the air conditioning. Very unusual indeed. But yeah, the pedal layout, the way the car feels, it feels unsurprisingly quite a lot like a Mk2 Cavalier. But there's the ride. We're just floating over the undulations in a way a Mk2 Cavalier doesn't. So Daewoo, far from just took that Mk2 Cavalier basis, they actually reworked it and they re-engineered it, and I think stiffened the structure up, so it feels really quite tight to drive. It's very pleasant. But yeah, like I say, this example with such low mileage, very unusual. But here comes a national speed limit, so we can give it a few beans. Very Cavalier. And then you get to the bends and it's very sure-footed handling. It handles really, really well. The steering has got a lovely weight to it for power steering. And again, power steering wasn't all that common on your family cars of the mid-1990s. The top spec models might have had it, but the lower spec certainly not. Oh yeah, it really does float so nicely out on the open road, and it's very quiet actually. There's not too many creaks or groans from the dashboard. It's yeah, it feels good. I think a lot of people would have thought, yeah, I'm getting a decent car for the money here, and it must have given the European manufacturers a lot to think about. The current owner has owned the car for a few years. Speed hump. Oh wow. That was almost as good as the Citroen this was meant to be. Yeah, I think he's owned the car 3 or 4 years and put 5,000 miles on it, so he uses it sparingly in the summer months. You may have seen this car. It has been in 2 of my reports at least, when I did the Mach run in my City Rover, and also Retro Rides Gathering at Shelsley Walsh. That event coming up again on the 22nd of August. And this car will be at Festival of the Unexceptional. Although a quick note on Festival of the Unexceptional, all tickets sold out. Here we go then. I've been told the speedometer does not read correctly, so 65 miles an hour on here should be about 70. Yeah. Lovely long legs. So we're cruising at the motorway limit. The engine's doing almost 3,000 revs, but I can't hear it. There is quite a lot of road noise. And a hint of wind noise. The sunroof probably doesn't help with that. I'm going to turn the aircon off. It's actually too cold. That's fierce. But yeah, an astonishingly competent car, I think. It's a shame there are so few of these left, but things like the ABS issue and corrosion issues, they corrode just like a Mk2 Cavalier, unsurprisingly. And of course they were just cheap cars. They were thrown away before there were any attempts for these cars to become collector's cars. And that's a real shame, because this feels so competent. This is such a great car. And it was cars like the Daewoo Espero and the Proton, the ever-improving Hyundai, that really saw off other cheap cars. The Lada Samara, the Skoda Favorit, although that's the start of Skoda improving into what it has become today. Other cheap cars like that were kind of done away with because you could get cheap cars like this. And this is a perfectly competent car. And as much as I love cars like the Lada Samara and even the Skoda Favorit to a certain extent, this offers so much more refinement, and this really is a complete package. Sadly, Daewoo rather overstretched itself, expanding into Romania and Poland and other factories all over the world, and eventually Daewoo Motor went bankrupt in about 2000 and General Motors took over what was left. So there's Korean factories churning out some General Motors cars, some of which we got in the UK as cars such as the Vauxhall Viva, the modern version. Ooh. Well, there we go. They say never meet your heroes, but if your heroes are things as humble as a Daewoo Espero, well, I don't think you'd be disappointed. And for me, that is a major ticking off of a long-held box. I've wanted to drive one of these for years. I've always wondered, what are they like? And the truth is, they're great. That is a lovely car. I so wish more of them had been saved, because yeah, that's very enjoyable. And I love the styling. The styling is trying to be European, yet I think somehow manages to look quite oriental despite being an Italian design for a French car. Fascinating history and a fascinating car, a lovely example. So thank you very much to Lawrence for letting me drive this car, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Farewell.